Welcome to Right from the Bible. We continue our study in the book of Matthew, beginning in chapter 2, verse 1. Our study continues now in the book of Matthew, chapter 2, verse 1. And just to refresh our memories, we had completed chapter 1 last week, and we ended on the note where we had found out that Jesus now had been born of Mary singularly, fulfilling the prophecy that we had seen in Isaiah chapter 7, verse 14, that a virgin is going to bring forth a son, and his name shall be called Emmanuel, meaning God with us. Joseph keeps Mary pure. Now, the narrative of Matthew skips over a few things that are picked up by Luke and information that is associated to what has happened with Jesus and his time of offerings for the firstborn male of a home. There is supposed to be, if you were of a family of wealth, you would offer an unblemished lamb or a goat, all the way down to individuals who were of very little means, which would be the offering of 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons. And we find out that Joseph and Mary are of very little means. And so when the days of purification are over on the 8th day, when the child is now circumcised and sanctified unto the Lord, they offer two turtle doves. And so that is omitted from Matthew's narrative, and he jumps right into the emphasis once again being in Matthew as Jesus is king. He jumps in verse 1 to this event that is going to occur with the Magi coming from the east. And let's go ahead and begin by reading verse 1. And it states, "Now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem." Now, Bethlehem, of course, is significant because we are going to find out within this particular passage that it is prophesied that Jesus would be born in Bethlehem. Bethlehem is the hometown of David. He is going to be recognized as the son of David, sit on the throne of David. And so this hand of providence, once again, that is not picked up in Matthew's narrative, but is picked up in Luke's, where there goes forth an edict and that everybody must return to the town of their birth, causing Joseph to take Mary as she is pregnant with Jesus and travel from Nazareth to Bethlehem, thus fulfilling that portion of the prophecy. And we're going to see a few more of them spill out within chapter 2. Now, what's significant to note here is that Herod the king, and you will see Herods throughout the New Testament. Herod is the family name, this one being Herod the Great. And we will hear of Herod Archelaus, Herod Antipas, Herod Philip, and the like as we go on. And each one has their own distinct personality and characteristics, the majority of them being very tyrannical and brutal. But none measures up to Herod the Great. And let's discuss him for just a moment. Approximately 40 years, some state as many as 43 years, he is given the responsibility to be king over the area of, and historians would refer to it as Palestine, we would refer to it as Israel. And what happens is at the onset of his rule, or what is supposed to be his rule, the Jews are fighting against him. Herod wants to be viewed as a Jew. He wants to be recognized as a Jewish convert, although he carries no characteristics whatsoever as to holding to the strict nature and practices of the Jewish religion. He is actually the son of an Edomite. And if you are familiar with, the Edomites are descendants of Esau, Jacob and Esau. So they are combatant one towards another. Herod, coming from that line, now wants to be recognized as a Jewish convert. The Jews do not want to see him that way. For the first 3 to 6 years, he finds himself in conflict with the Jews, and he goes forth and slaughters many of them. When he finally takes rule over the area that has been granted to him from Augustus Caesar, he really only has control for 37 of those 40 to 43 years. And he is a brutal, brutal tyrant. Josephus writes of him having killed 3 of his own sons. He kills his wife, Mariamne, and has children by other women. Malthrace, who is a Samaritan, Cleopatra, who is actually Jewish. And we'll find out as we read more so through history that when you hear, as an example, that Herod Antipas has taken his brother Philip's wife, Herodias, that is actually his half brother. It is not his full brother. Anyways, Herod the Great is a very brutal man. He is tyrannical. He is a dictator, and he uses torture, brutality, and killing as a means by which to enact his authority. As a matter of fact, it was stated regarding Augustus Caesar that he had said, "I would much rather be Herod's sow than his son." In other words, he would rather be a pig under Herod's rule than his own son, because it was not safe to be a family member, because Herod would just as soon go and have you killed. As a matter of fact, and Josephus writes this when he gets into the detail of the latter days of Herod's life, that he is taken out by a really severe illness. And he gives detail of the impact that I'm going to save us from discussing over how it affected his body. But to give you somewhat of an example of just how brutal of an individual that he was, as he was approaching the days in which he knew he was going to die, he felt that a great king was recognized by the amount of mourning that would take place at the time of his death. And since he felt that nobody was really going to miss him when he went throughout the area of Israel, and he took heads of all of the homes, and he had them held within a theater, if you will. And if there were individuals, once the letter was sent out that he was calling for them, who did not respond, he would have them killed immediately. And what he did was, as he set them off to the side, held them basically imprisoned within this theater, one with the other, and the order was given after large sums of money were given to the soldiers and to the leaders within the army, that when he died, they would go and they would kill all of these men. And the reason that he wanted that to be done was for the sole purpose of knowing that it would cause mourning throughout all of Israel, knowing that these individuals who were innocent had been killed, and therefore, since mourning would have gone out at his death, he would have felt that he was a great king. That is an example of how demented he was as a king. But what's interesting here is that as those who were sincere and dedicated to the belief and the faith of Judaism, and knowing that there was eventually going to be the Messiah who would be the king, he was going to now be contrary to everything that they recognized by people who were in authority, who ruled with an iron fist. If it wasn't Herod over the area of Israel, then it was Caesar Augustus, who could be just as brutal. And so therefore, if you can imagine another king coming onto the scene who was going to rule with a rod of iron, which we know that Jesus is going to when he comes for the millennial reign, would have been just one more individual added to the mix. And so now we see the significance, if you will, of Philippians chapter 2 and Ephesians chapter 2 discussing the work of Christ coming as a servant and offering himself as a sacrifice to be able to restore us now into a right relationship with the Father. This behavior being contrary to what they recognized the behavior of a king would be in their day and age. So in verse 1, now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem. Now, these wise men that we identify as magi, which is the plural for magus, which is singular, are individuals who are thought to come as far as from the area of Persia, or what would be now identified as Babylon, which had fallen, of course. And there are those who speculate, and I think some of the speculation is sound, that they may very well have garnered wisdom and an understanding of the belief of Judaism through individuals such as Daniel. If we were to go, well, I'm going to get a little bit ahead of myself at this point in time, but what is significant here is that they're coming from the east. Now, if they were to have made the trek from Babylon to Jerusalem, the best example that we have of the 900 plus mile journey and the length of time that it would take from a biblical perspective would be found in the book of Ezra chapter 8 beginning with verse 24, and it is going to discuss the length of time that it took Ezra and his entourage to go from Babylon to Jerusalem back in the Old Testament times when they were seeking to rebuild the temple. Eventually Nehemiah would come and get started on the walls. But the period of time took 4 months. Now, this is important to understand. There's got to be a distinction made between Ezra's trip and these magi. And the distinction is this. Ezra knew exactly where he was going. The magi were following a star, providentially leading them by God. And we'll understand that a little bit further as we move into this. So we have one Herod the king who has no desire to see the anointed child of God. And we have 3 kings who would be recognized as Gentiles now. And they passionately are coming to seek out this anointed child who would be king. And so they come from the east to Jerusalem. Now, it makes sense that that is the direction in which they would head. And I want you, if you will, for this moment in time, put yourself in the shoes of these individuals. They are, in essence, astronomers. They are viewing the skies, and they are assessing by the things that are being shown to them in the skies the communicative nature that God is pouring forth, stating that something unique is going to happen. If you will, turn with me to Psalms chapter 19 quickly here. And when I get there, I'm going to go ahead and start reading for time's sake. But Psalms 19 states this: the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. Day unto day utters speech, and night unto night shows knowledge. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. Their line is gone out throughout all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them hath he set a tabernacle for the sun, which is a bridegroom coming out of his chamber, and rejoices as a strong man to run a race. His going forth is from the end of the heaven, and his circuit unto the ends of it, and there is nothing hid from the heat thereof. Now, if you were to examine that passage in light of understanding that these magi have been assessing the skies and the providential hand of God, which would be leading them to who knows where at this point. They just know that they are going to follow this star, and we're going to see unique characteristics associated to it, because whereas an individual would be assessing the skies on a regular basis, this star stands as unique, and it begins to lead them. Now, take into consideration what we had learned regarding Ezra's trip taking 4 months, and let's take into consideration that these individuals coming from the east would likely have been of Persian descent and likely would have come from the area of Babylon, thereabouts. So let's just link these two things together. You're one of those individuals, you have been assessing the skies, and now all of a sudden, this miracle is starting to take place. And all you know is that you need to follow this star, but you do not know exactly where it is going to lead you. So you put together your entourage. There are kings. There is oftentimes an assessment that the kings were 3 because there were 3 gifts. We don't know whether it was 2, 3, 10, 5. We don't know the exact number. But we do know that there is more than one. And so they began this process of following this star on this 4-month trek. So they have no idea from night to night where exactly this star is going to lead them. But it makes sense that as they are getting closer to the point of destination, that it is becoming more and more apparent that they are headed towards a large town, i.e., that would be Jerusalem. Now, if you were coming from the east, you would be actually a little bit you'd be on the northern portion, if you will, of Israel, and you would come down likely over the area of Galilee. So as you began to approach, the outstanding town before you would be Jerusalem. And it only seems to make sense that if you are now moving in the direction of trying to determine where exactly this star is going to lead you so that you can find this anointed child soon to be king, well, you'd go to the capital city, and that is Jerusalem. After all, as you are moving forward, it is now daytime, and the likelihood is that you have just been set in a given direction based upon the way the star was pointing you, but it's daylight now, and you don't have any direction from the star, so you end up in Jerusalem, and this is where your journey has brought you to this point, and you start asking questions, and that is exactly what they begin to do in verse 2, saying, "Where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and are come to worship him." Now, when they make the statement, "We have seen his star in the east," it doesn't mean that the star was in the east, but from where they were at in the east, the star was leading them back because they are coming from the east and going, in essence, west. So they're saying from the point of our from the point of our onset of our journey, that is where we ended up seeing his star. It has led us to this place. We came for this very purpose. Where is this king that we have come and searched for? For we have seen his star in the east and are come to worship him. Now, interestingly enough, as Matthew now in the genealogy starts to bring to light and offers up these women that are a part of the genealogy of Christ: Rahab, Tamar, Ruth, Bathsheba. Now he's emphasizing the fact that it's not Jerusalem that is being recognized, or let me restate. It's not the inhabitants of Jerusalem or Israel that are searching for the Messiah, or even being allowed to have it pointed out to them by this providential star, but it is these 3 Gentile kings that are from the east, almost 1,000 miles away. And they're the ones who set their entire lives aside so that they can go forth and search out this child. We have come to worship him. Their objective is worship. Herod's objective is going to be disastrous. Verse 3, when Herod the king had heard these things, he was troubled, and take special note of this, and all Jerusalem with him. They were not happy or excited about the fact that now the long-awaited for Messiah was going to end up being born in their day and age. And it is a head scratcher to wonder, why wouldn't they be? Well, in Herod's case, it is quite obvious, because if this king turns out to fulfill prophecy, and we're going to touch upon that in just a moment, but if he is here to fulfill prophecy, Herod's in a really bad place. He has been treating the Jewish people poorly. He has been tyrannical. He has ruled with an iron fist, and his own impious life has led him to have multiple partners and children from multiple women. Let's continue on. In verse 4 it says, and when he had gathered all the chief priests and scribes of the people together, he demanded of them where Christ should be born. And they said unto him, in Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it is written by the prophet, and thou, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, art not the least among the princes of Judah, for out of thee shall come a governor that shall rule my people Israel. This is a prophecy being stated from Micah chapter 5, verse 2. And so if you take note of the prophecy, it says, he is going to come up, for out of thee shall come a governor that shall rule my people Israel. Well, who's right now ruling the people of Israel? It's Herod. And Herod does not want any competition, to the degree that when he thinks his own sons are trying to usurp his authority and his position, he has them killed, including their mother, Marianne. And so he is not of the mindset that he is just going to willingly say, oh, now's the time for me to just step aside and allow whoever God has anointed to take my position. That's not Herod. That's not the way that he thinks. That's not where he is at. Now, there is something interesting and this is speculation on my part, but I could well imagine that if there's something so outstanding to happen as to have these kings travel all the way from the east, because they feel that everything that they are learning and seeking and moving towards is to find this anointed king, that they would go beyond merely just this one particular verse. It gives them an understanding of where the Messiah is to be born and a little bit about his characteristics. Once again, at the very end of the verse, for out of thee shall come a governor that shall rule my people Israel. So now they've got that within their mind. There is likely the conversation continuing on about who exactly is this Messiah. What is his characteristics? What is he going to be like? What does the Bible have to say? Because where did they go for their information immediately? He went to the learned individuals who would understand the scriptures, and they led him right to a prophecy from Micah. Now, what you might find interesting is that Micah is a contemporary of Isaiah. And this is what Isaiah has to say in chapter 9, verses 6 and 7. He says, for unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Oh, we're not just talking about somebody who's going to sit on the throne of David. We're actually referring to him as God. Now, one of the things that I find interesting regarding this period in time is you now have a Caesar, Augustus, who wants to be viewed as God or an actual child of the gods. And then you have in Herod the Great, a king who wants to be recognized as great as the greatest of all. And now you have bound within this child, the Son of the living God, you have both the Son of God and the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Let me go ahead and read Isaiah chapter 9, verse 7. Of the increase of his government and peace, there shall be no end upon the throne of David and upon his kingdom, to order it and to establish it with judgment and with justice from henceforth, even forever. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this. So now we might have a little bit of a greater understanding of why all Jerusalem is troubled with Herod. And that is because this king that is going to sit on the throne of David is going to establish it with judgment and with justice. Oh, when you're the kind of individual who is stepping out of line, and as they had so regularly stated from years gone past, and the long arm of the law has reached out and nabbed you, you're in a lot of trouble. And if you're familiar with the term when they say, boy, the judge is going to throw the book at you. In other words, everything that it has to offer associated to your conviction is going to end up being utilized against you. Well, you can well imagine that if a righteous king is coming to sit on the throne of David and perform justice and judgment, and you're not living according to the law of God, that is not going to bode well for you. And we might get some insight on the basis of that as to why they are all troubled. Let's continue on. So in verse 7 it says, Then Herod, when he had privately called the wise men, inquired of them diligently what time the star appeared. So now he's doing a little bit of his own research. He wants to find out, what length of time were you initially communicated to, so that I can kind of get an understanding of how old this child may very well be at this point. And what's interesting here is that Herod is ruling from Jerusalem, and Mary and Joseph would have taken him up to the temple so that he could be consecrated and circumcised. Had no knowledge of it whatsoever. This is something that has already taken place. These men, in essence, are bringing news that in today's world we would say is old news. But because nobody was paying attention, and the only individuals, as we would find out from another gospel, that would have even known outside of this would have been the shepherds that were communicated with the very night that Jesus was born. They're now in this situation where he's trying to gather information from them because he has a plot in mind. They don't know that plot yet. So it says, Then Herod, when he had privately called the wise men, inquired of them diligently what time the star appeared, and he sent them to Bethlehem and said, Go and search diligently for the young child, and when you have found him, bring me word again, that I may come and worship him also. So now, after he has gotten some information from them, he provides them information and some direction, and he says, Bethlehem is the town in which you want to head to. And Bethlehem is further south than Jerusalem. So as we had discussed before, on their journey, as they would have been following the star would have been leading them ahead by night. They get on their horses, they move in that direction. They come to Jerusalem because it's daytime. Now all of a sudden they're finding out they still got to go farther south. They've got to go farther south. They learned this from Herod. They will be directed by the star. We will have to interrupt our study there. Join us again as we continue on in our study of the book of Matthew. Until next time, may the Lord richly bless you as you continue to grow in the grace and the knowledge of the Lord Jesus Christ.